family. My name is Helen from the batch 2000. The topic I have for today is raising our children in the favor of God and man. My son was getting ready to go, he's about 12. He was getting ready to go play the cricket matches for the season. Usually we have it in the months of winter. It's not yet winter here, but it's slowly setting in, and it's a little cooler than the other months, so we have it during the season. He represents the school and the clubs, and a club. So he has to play both leagues during the season. It'll be school against school and club against club. And he was all worried being the first match for the season. He was quite concerned about how it's going to turn out, what is going to happen. And I was trying to help him, but seeing that he was too nervous, I just told him, go talk to Jesus about it. He didn't have his morning devotion yet, so I said, go have it and come. Let's see what God tells you today. He went, and his passage fell to Luke 2, 41 through 51. He was reading, and then we have a small chat about it. So while talking to him about what he read, I was reminded of what God taught me some time back. A few years ago, a couple of years ago, I was talking to God about my son almost reaching teenage years, and I have a friend who had some really difficult teenage children. So we used to talk about them and pray over them, and that panic sort of got into me. So I was talking to God about it, and he led me to the same passage, Luke 2, 41 through 51. There isn't much about Jesus as a child in the Bible, but this certain passage really got my attention then. So I was reading it, and the Holy Spirit showed me that Jesus, although he was filled with wisdom, although he knew much more than the elders of that time, let's say, putting it in today's context, he knew much more than the pastors and the preachers and the evangelists and all these teachers. And they were even surprised at what he knew, right? But his parents traveled on without him. After the Passover, they returned back to Jerusalem, find him in the temple, and they after 3 days, he was an independent one. Yeah, teenagers try to be independent, you see, and but they're not emotionally there yet. So that's where the aggression, the anger, the frustration, and all builds up, because they feel like no one is understanding them, or they're left out of some manner. So while God led me to that passage a few years ago, and he taught me, my children, when they're redeemed, when they belong to God, they do not need to fall under the worldly pattern of teenagers. They can be Christ's pattern of teenager. So I was super excited that Steve was reading the same passage on that day, and we had a little chat about it. So there's this verse which says, verse 51, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in the favor of God and man. Before that, he went, verse 50 says, he was obedient. He went back home with his parents, and he was obedient to them. And then verse 51 follows, okay? So obedience and humility are two major things that Jesus emulated, and we are supposed to emulate that to our children, because children don't need to be told. They need to be they need to see. They need to see a demonstration. They always imitate. They always mimic what they see, right? So God taught me that obedience and humility should come from me first, and then it will overflow. Out of the overflow of mine, of my spiritual life, of my walk with Christ, my children will grow. So I was sharing this with Steve, and he was amazed at how teenagers can be different and how Jesus was different. That day he went to play. He went in as the opening batsman. He was running. I don't know many cricket terms, but I hope this makes sense. He hit a big one. He thought it would go for a 4, but it was sort of short, so he started to run to at least pick a couple of runs. The other guy, his partner, didn't run back, and Steve touched the crease and returned back. By then, the ball had been thrown at the stumps, and he was run out, or whatever, out though. So he was very much disappointed, with his head down and in a lot of disgrace. He said, I had my head down, and then when I lifted my head up, I was in the air because the opponent, the team, the opposition, not opposition, sorry, the team that was playing opposite them, picked him up, put him on their shoulders, and they were cheering for him. It was quite strange because there's a lot of aggression amid schools, you see. So it was pretty strange as to how those guys could do this. His teammates were all upset and worried, but the opponents were actually cheering him on and said, "Good job, Steve, you played well." Steve came back. He was not so disappointed as he usually is if he loses a match. But when I heard this, I told Ruben, you know what, my husband, Ruben, you know what we read this morning? We read about finding the favor of God and man, and we prayed about it. So that's what God did for Steve. And Steve was happy because he got to see what God can do for him in the midst of what happened around him. And I want to encourage all of us here is when Jesus was obedient and he was humble, he humbled himself. Although he was found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. So God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, right? When we are obedient and when we are humble, that overflow will go to our children and also to the children that God has entrusted into our care. They may not be our own, but we are responsible for them. And we are accountable to God for them. One day he's going to ask us, what did you do with this one or that one? Where are you pouring into their lives? It's so important to God, so it should be important to us as well. I would encourage all of us to look out for those young ones and sow into them, because that soil will grow and produce a rich harvest if we are diligent. Thank you.